So the 2025 Master Duel World Championship qualifiers have already begun. In fact, you can go ahead and play Stage 1 already and get your D-level max. We're not even a week into the month yet. Konami's really starting it early this year for some reason. But yeah, in light of that, let's do a tier list on the meta for the World Championship qualifiers. And as you can see, we have a lot of decks to cover here, so let's just get into it. This is quite a bit to go over. And first, let's start off with the decks from the new pack. Now, if you are looking for decks that I would recommend to play to grind this for Stage 2 of the World Championship qualifiers, or potentially even qualify and do well with, I would probably look elsewhere than the decks from the new pack. If all you care about is playing the best decks for this meta, that you can probably skip this pack, which I feel like a lot of people are actually doing, because these decks I don't think are going to be particularly too impactful on the meta. And all of these decks share a problem in that they all kind of suck going second, which is like an issue in a best of one format, or sometimes they suck not even just going second, but maybe in general. But I guess we can go over those. So first off, one of the new decks is Ryu-Ge. Ryu-Ge is besides like the memes and the jokes, it's a deck, quote unquote deck, consisting of like a bunch of level 10 monsters that's like that have different conditions to special summon themselves, and then they search continuous spells that you place in the field and stuff like that. I'd say quote unquote deck because I'm not sure if this deck is able to be played pure. It feels like it really lacks starters, and the fact that the majority of people that play the Ryu-Ge cards are combining it with other decks. I've seen like Ryu-Ge Sword Soul, Ryu-Ge Voiceless Voice is probably the most common hybrid. I've seen Ryu-Ge Dinosaur Dinomorphia 60 card for some goddamn reason. Don't know what kind of crack people are smoking with they come up with some of these decks, but yeah, the thing is with Ryu-Ge is that by itself the engine doesn't put up too much, because like I think at the high end you end up making like a resurgence because of the level 10 monsters. I mean, what else are you gonna make with your level 10 bodies? And then you can search the continuous spell, which is basically a dimensional fissure on your opponent's turn. So you get like an Omni Negate or pop, and then like a dimension fissure, which is okay. But in terms of like combo, like the combo ceilings for an unresolved like 1 to 2 card combo, it's not the most, it's not the most impressive thing. And while combining Ryu-Ge cards with another deck would probably make your Ryu-Ge deck better, I don't think it improves the other deck that you're combining it with. For example, right, Ryu-Ge Voiceless Voice, I do not think it's better than just straight up Voiceless Voice. Like most Voiceless Voice hybrids, like Voiceless Voice Melodious, so on and so forth. I think just playing Voiceless Voice by itself, or quote unquote pure, is better than playing Voiceless Voice combined with other engines, because the main problem with Voiceless Voice is the fact that it struggles going second, and the things that would make it help in most going second is by running non-engine, and when you're taking up non-engine slots to run a secondary engine, that seems counterproductive to addressing the deck's weaknesses. So yeah, another issue I've seen with Ryu-Ge Voiceless Voice in particular, because Ryu-Ge Voiceless Voice is probably going to be like the 90% of Ryu-Ge builds, is that the Ryu-Ge deck has like 3 different continuous spells that it can place in its its back row, or it has 2 different continuous spells in its engine, and the Voiceless Voice deck has 3 different spell traps that it places in its back row for its engine. So you do the math, okay? If you resolve your Ryu-Ge engine and your Voiceless Voice engine, your entire back row is filled with face-up continuous spell and trap cards, which means that you can't you kind of clog your back row, and you can't even activate your other spell cards. Like you can't activate stuff like pre-prep or your ritual spells like prayers or Nadir, if you even run that. So like even like that's kind of like a just weird anti-synergy with Voiceless Voice. And I this might be a bit harsh. This deck is definitely not the worst It's probably not going to be the worst deck on this list, in my opinion, but it's nothing impressive. It's not something I would really recommend if you're being serious about grinding the World Championship qualifier with. In fact, Voiceless Voice. In fact, I'll just put Voiceless Voice here since we already talked about it. I think just playing straight up Voiceless Voice is a lot better than just trying to combine it with Ryu-Ge. And also, Voiceless Voice did get a little improvement in that it got Nadir Servant back from 2 to 3. So if you were playing Nadir Servant, you know, it's just another good card in your deck. If you were playing Branded Voiceless Voice, well, Branded Fusion also went from 1 to 2. So if you're playing either of those secondary engines in Voiceless Voice already, like Branded or Nadir Servant, like those already got better, and I think those are way better engines to play than with the Ryu-Ge cards. And I know there's something, probably something's going to point out that Nadir Servant is risky to play in a meta full of Branded, right? Because if you activate Nadir Servant and get Maximus send 2 from the extra deck, then doesn't Branded just get 2 free, like, Albas Fusions in the grave for, like, 2 free cards or searches in the end phase? Technically, yes, if you don't do anything about it. But you can alleviate this problem with Voiceless Voice with playing Nadir Servant against Branded by just playing 1 copy of Cyframe Lord Omega, which is, when you go Maximus, then you send Omega as one of your sends, so that when your Branded opponent sends 2 Albas Fusions to the grave, you use your Omega to shuffle back 1 of the Albas Fusions, and then the second Albas Fusion that they try to use in the end phase, you just negate with Skull Guardian, and then there you go. Your Branded opponent got 0 value out of your own Maximus, so that's like a way to mitigate Maximus versus Branded opponent, and that makes it in my opinion, the Nadir Servant still worth playing, even in a Branded heavy meta. But yeah, other than that, Voiceless Voice is like the same. It's pretty much Voices has been the same as always been since release. Like this is one of the decks that's gone under the like the words are hard. Okay, this is one of the decks that's gone through the least amount of change since it was released in Master Duel. So like it's the way you play it right now is not too different from the way you played it on release. But yeah, 1 card combos plays well through hand traps. You gotta get creative with ways going second. So probably by playing more non-engine and like depending on which hand traps you think are good, which does not include running the Ryu-Ges, unfortunately. But yeah, the next card in the pack after that, Voiceless Voice Tangent. So Materiactor is another deck like Ryu-Ge, not in the sense that in the playstyle or anything, but like in the sense that Materiactor is kind of not really a deck by itself. Even more so than Ryu-Ge. At least Ryu-Ge has like a lot more cards that you can potentially try to fill in a 40 card deck, even though I don't think it's sufficient. Materiactor, I'm not sure if you even can build pure Materiactor, because it's just a deck that makes 1 rank 3. It's archetype of rank 3, which is just 1 bounce. Like that's not really... You're playing like hand trap control with 1 rank 3 turbo. Like the most common way you're probably going to see Materiactor is it's going to be like a lot of other Xyz decks. It's going to be playing the Xyz armor package, so like Sharks before it, or like sub like Zodiac or Goblins. All of these decks, you know, they play the armored Xyz bricks to help them, because I mean, it's a rank 3 deck, so you can just make Fortress on top of your Xyz and then go do your normal armored Xyz plays and like suck your opponent's monsters and so on and so forth. But also, like, I think maybe the best way to play Materiactor is to combine it with Goblins, which has another issue of, I think playing Goblins with another engine besides the Materiactors is probably better, because I'm not quite sure what the Materiactor is supposed to add to the Goblin deck besides just another rank 3 option, but at the same time, then it takes away your slots to run a good engine like Fiendsmith, for example. But yeah, I don't know. This deck is not very interesting. It doesn't even do anything, in my opinion, that's really unique. Like at least Ryu-Ge, quote unquote, is like more unique in its gameplay. This is just the 3rd or 4th best armored Xyz deck that you can also play with Goblins, which, you know, Big Gabonga is based, I guess, but I think Goblins are probably better off not even playing the Materiactor. But yeah, then we have Mimighoul. So Mimighoul is actually a deck. Unlike Ryu-Ge and Materiactor, you can play an actual Mimighoul deck, quote unquote pure, you can put in other sub engines like Kashira or like other stuff if you want, but Mimighoul is a deck that has an actual end board and a game plan using its own cards. If you don't know what Mimighoul does, the gimmick behind the deck is you summon a bunch of your Mimighoul monsters to your opponent's side of the field face down. Then when they get flipped face up, they do some kind of effect that screws over your opponent, and then you get them back. So for example, one of them is Mimighoul Dragon, where when it gets flipped face up, it just nukes your opponent's board, and then it comes back to you, and you get control of it back. Or this card right here, Mimighoul Fairy, when it's flipped face up, it floodgates your opponent out of monster effects from monsters that were special from the hand, and then you get the fairy back, and you can do whatever you want with it. And you can flip these during your opponent's turn with the trap card Mimighoul Room. So, yeah, that way it's like a convoluted way to get a quick play Ryu-Ge or just other effects, or like you can get there's ones that like draw a card and so on and so forth during your opponent's turn with your Mimighoul monsters. And then you can also there's also a Fiendsmith, which is also kind of toxic, where if whoever controls the face down monster cannot normal summon a monster straight up. So like imagine you're playing against Blue Eyes and you have done the Mimighoul dungeon up, and then your opponent is like, well, so you're telling me I can't summon my Effort Barrel, my Sage, or anything? Awesome, sick. So yeah, Mimighoul actually, if you let them get their end board, it's actually really annoying to play through. That being said, it's not too hard trying to get into their end board because this deck is very, very vulnerable to hand traps. This isn't like a lot of other top tier decks this format that play through hand traps like nothing. You actually do mind hand traps, and you also do. This is unfortunately a deck that also kind of really does not appreciate the Mulcharmies or Maxi. And there's this one card in particular that Mimighoul really does not want to see, which is Dominus Impulse. Because the way Dominus Impulse works is that if your opponent Dominus Impulses you, it means that your opponent cannot activate Earth monsters for the rest of the duel. The problem with that is that you're giving your Mimighoul monsters, which are Earth attribute, to your opponent, and then your opponent and then when it gets flipped face up, your opponent is applying the effect of the Mimighoul monster that you gave them. But if they Dominus Impulse from hand, they're not allowed to use Earth effects. So your Mimighoul monster that you gave them for the express purpose of like using their flip effect doesn't work anymore. So your entire deck, every single monster just got floodgated out of the game by Dominus Impulse. So yeah, be wary of that. If you play against a deck like Mermail or Spright or like Fire King or Labrynth and they draw Dominus Impulse, that's probably the most lopsided matchup in the entire game, and that's like you probably auto lose on the spot, so that's kind of annoying. Like 10 to 15% of the time, you just play like an unwinnable matchup. So that's that's very cool. But yeah, assuming you can do your combo properly a decent amount of time, this deck isn't terrible, and it's an actual deck by itself. It's just the times you aren't gonna be as often as the top tier deck. So it has a win condition. It just has the inconsistency of actually achieving that win condition. And then next we have this is a picture of Crystron Smiger. Its name is Smiger MBT. But yeah, this is to represent Crystrons. And Crystrons are probably the best deck from the new pack. And yeah, the deck that the one deck that played Crystron Halki Firebacks like it was a fair card. Got it. But unfortunately, Hulk is no longer with us. But yeah, the Crystron is like a synchro deck, as you know, it's kind of obvious based on considering it's the deck that Crystron Hulk came from. But it plays on your opponent's turn, and it has a lot of good qualities. It makes a decent board, obviously, but it's very unlike the decks here, the other decks in this pack. This deck is actually somewhat resilient to hand traps. It has a new card like Tristarls, which lets you just dodge targeting protection, or targeting negation, like Imperm or Veilers, like they're nothing. By literally, you can just summon a monster from deck and then quick synchro to dodge anything. You play on your opponent's turn, so even if you get Max Seed or Fool Lost, you can just, you can stop early and then just do the rest of your single plays on your opponent's turn. And Yeah, it's a neat deck. It's pretty competent. Unfortunately, that mainly applies when going first. When going second, this deck has more problems going second than you would realize, because this is a deck that only does half its plays and sets up half its end board on its own turn, and wants to quick synchro on your opponent's turn to summon out all its big synchro monsters with all their cool effects and everything. And oftentimes your end board is going to have like a couple of Crystron monsters, like a Citri and a Cristaros on the field, with the express purpose of synchro something on a quick synchro something on your opponent's turn. But obviously that's like a bit of an issue when you go second, because then it's like sort of like a semi-trap deck problem, where how trap decks, when they go second, they can't activate any of their trap cards until it passes back to their opponent on turn 3. So their opponent, it's like you're going third. When you go second, it's like you're going third, because your opponent gets 2 turns to your 1 turn before you get to do anything. Crystron is somewhat like that, where you can't really get full value out of your plays until your opponent gets 2 turns before you do half of your turn 1 setup, or half your first turn setup, but then you have to do the rest of it after your opponent already gets a second turn. It can be a bit rough. Like, this deck relies on secondary engines or non-engine in order to help it go second, because its main engine is obviously not cut out to break a lot of established boards when with the issue that it only does half of it on its own turn. But overall, I think it's better than all the other 3 decks from this new pack, because this is a deck that actually can play through interruption fairly decently, and it actually has plays into Maxi, and it's so on and so forth, and it's provided it goes first. Going second, it's a bit of an issue, which is why I'm only putting it here in like tier 3. But I mean, all of these decks have all of the decks from the new pack have issues going second, and some have issues going first and second, which at least Crystron doesn't have the going first problem that some of these decks might have. But yeah, that's basically the new decks from the new pack. Again, I don't really think they're going to be top tier, or close to top tier for that matter. Some can be they can be fun to play. You can bust them out after the World Championship qualifier. But if you're seriously thinking of grinding, I don't think that these will be the best choice for you. Also, the fact that a deck like Crystron is like very grindy, and games can take a lot of turns, just because you can't end games quickly when you're going second. So like it makes the game length when you're grinding for like a long time, when you're grinding second stage, longer too, which can also be annoying when other decks can just like end games quickly and let you get more games in. But yeah. Next, so there was also like a ban list a couple days before the release of the new pack, and one of the decks that benefited from the ban list was Branded. Brand Fusion went from 1 to 2, and if you saw the rating duels this month, Branded had the most representation in the top 10 of rated for I believe last month was May. They had like 3 in the top 10. Now, granted, I will say that these players, all 3 of these are Chinese players. 2 of them are from like the SCS clan or group or whatever that group is, which it's like the same people are just playing Branded and then topping rated duels like every other month it seems. But that's the thing with Branded, okay? Like, if you're a good player, if you're a dedicated player, if you're like the SCS Chinese players on top rated that can just play Branded, devote their entire time to playing Branded, and then get top 10 rated, like that, yeah, you're good with that. But if you're just starting to pick this up, it's going to be a lot harder, and it's why I don't, even though the brand obviously it had the best results in the top 10 last season, I don't think it's the best deck, because it's just most players aren't going to be able to get the most out of it. Like this, on paper, this is not a format that's friendly to Branded, because there are so many decks that are just super strong and impressive going first, and obviously when you're playing Branded is a deck that does not traditionally play very many hand traps, nor does it have the room to play that many hand traps. So like, you're oftentimes playing into fully established boards, which are stronger than ever this format. So that doesn't spell good news for a Branded going second. And even when you go first, sometimes Like there are a lot of hand traps being played right now that Branded does not like dealing with, such as Bystials, for example, and then just the sheer fact that there are decks that are just playing out so many hand traps, and that Branded is very good when your opponents are playing less hand traps, because then it can just mostly set up its board unhindered, and then when you set up this board, Branded's board is unbreakable, and even through like board breakers, because even if you do manage to play through it, they have so much follow up in grinding game, and you're never going to be able to kill them through their board, because their boards just have so many big dumbass bodies on the field unless you basically stop them from getting those bodies on the field and summoning all their fusion monsters in the first place, you're never going to be able to OTK them in one turn, and then they can just kill you with the follow up that they always have in the main phase 3. So what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the best way to stop Brand is through hand traps, and just chucking hand traps at this so that it can't resolve its engine. Then that, like obviously Ash Brand fusion, but also like Imperm Alibur, like Imperm Cartagia, like all of this stuff, like Bystial does fusions engrave after a high spirit so that they don't get any follow up and stuff like that. And there are decks that just run tons of hand traps that we will get to later that are also very popular in this meta. So yeah, this meta is not very favorable to Branded, but I'm not gonna say Brand is like this placement is simply for the good Branded players, the best Branded players, the ones that would seemingly top 100 every Duelist Cup and like can easily get the top 10 rated in their sleep. Like in the hands of those players, Brand is up here. For the average player, it's reflected in like its win rate. Obviously, Brand doesn't have the highest win rate because there's only so few actual good Branded players, and then the rest of the Branded players who are not as good are dragging its win rate down. Which is why it's never seen at the top of the win rate in the official stats like other decks are. But yeah, because it's also so popular, and also alt art, branded alt art cards give this deck, at least it gives it an aura buff, right? And then another deck that got benefit from the ban list was Spright, and Spright is basically, aside from totally awesome, obviously, I think Spright is basically at full power now. It has none of its cards left on the ban list, which is neat. Now there's several ways you can play Spright. Like there's Tri-Brigade Spright, which was traditionally the most successful way to play Spright, but that was mainly because there was so many Spright cards on the limited list that you had to play a supplementary engine just for the deck to like fill itself out. But also you can play Pure Spright now, because now that you have 3 Jet, 3 Blue, and 3 Nimble Beaver, you have like all of your best starters and your best extenders at max copies now, so you can actually play like a deck that's somewhat reminiscent of what Spright was, even more so than when Spright on release, because the Spright on release starter was at 2, but this Spright is at even more like a higher power level than it was on release. So yeah, and then also there's Fiendsmith Spright, which I haven't experimented with yet, but Fiendsmith Spright has the easiest Fiendsmith bridge in the world. Sequence just makes Sprint because it's a rank 2, and then Sprint dumps Nimble Angler for Beaver, and that's full combo. So like it doesn't seem too bad. I'll have to test to see if Fiendsmith Spright is also a viable option, but yeah, there's lots of ways to play Spright now. Not Runic, mind you. I don't think Runic is... Runic is like the one Spright variant that's still I would not recommend. I don't think it's that great, because the problem with Runic is that the Runic cards are still hit on the ban list. So, if the benefit of playing Spright now is that it's unhit. Don't combine it with the engine that is hit. Just play with the cards that are... Play with its good cards, and not like the cards that are on the ban list still. And yeah, this is going to be Runic's... I'm putting Runic here just now because it's also representing my placement of Runic Stun, because I also don't think Runic Stun is the best way to play Stun, which we'll get to later, I suppose. But yeah, so back to Spright. I think it's actually I might be overestimating Spright a bit, because I've seen Tri-Brigade Spright top 100 many Duelist Cups and top 10 rating duels over the past year or so. Like even in Fire King Ubell format, even in Tenpai format, Tri-Brigade Spright was still topping, and that was when it had to run all the shitty Nimble bricks and it didn't have max copies of starters. But now its Spright is basically at full power. Like I actually have high hopes for this deck. maybe it's like I can see it being higher than something like Voiceless Voice before, which is like crazy because I didn't even include Spright in my previous tier list because it just seemed like there was only one guy playing Tri-Brigade Spright, and then there's like no one else was even playing it. But now, this Spright is a real deck. Maybe it's not. I don't think it's top tier or anything, because the game, power creep and so on and so forth. I think the cards could have come back a bit earlier, but it's definitely a completely competent deck that probably will see at least a couple, maybe 1 or 2 slots, or if not, maybe even slightly more top 100 slots in this year's Worlds Qualifiers. And cards from the last pack, because this pack is still in rotation, so Mermail is probably the best one. We'll just start with Mermail. So Mermail is like weird. So Mermail is along the line of a bunch of decks we're going to go through in this tier list that are just insanely oppressive, unfair, borderline auto-win going first decks that are really toxic to play against when you lose the coin flip. It's not just Mermail. There are other decks here, like let me try to find them here. So the OG, Gimmick Public FTK, we got Draco Slayer Pendulum, we got Isoda Infernoble Turbo, we got like we got Momento as well. That's another deck, just extremely toxic going first decks that, short of resolving a max C, it feels like it feels like it's impossible to stop them, and then you just auto lose in one way or another, either by like getting FTK'd or putting up like 8+ negates plus the floodgate, or like putting up 10 negates, or putting up multiple negates and a floodgate. We'll get to the Memento later, but yeah, and in the case of Mermail, you take your pick. You want to floodgate your opponent, you can do that. You want to put up negates, you can do that. If you want to hand your opponents for 3 to 4 cards, you can do that. You can do all of that. So yeah, the thing with Mermail is that I don't think it's the best of these decks, although it's up there. Mermail, sometimes there's like a huge difference in quality. There's a huge variance in the quality of Mermail hands that Mermail players will tell you. Because like sometimes you open Teus Dragoon, which is an FTK through 5 hand traps. Like your opponent could that literally Teus Dragoon plays through 5 hand traps. Or you could open Teus and you have to discard Teus, and then you lose to 1 hand trap. So like this, there are so many. Some quality of starters in Mermail are way better than others. Like if the difference between opening Dragoon and Shadow Squad and to like pitch for your effects and not opening the Dragoon or Shadow Squad is like the difference between playing. It's like a 2 to 3 hand trap difference in the number of hand traps you can actually play through, depending on if you open them or not. And yeah, but Mermail also going second is like a similar thing, but Mermail actually has a tool for going second, which is Poseidra. That's very good. It baits like 2 or 3 interruptions by itself, and then it can continue based on if you discard other Mermail water monsters for effects. And yeah, but the thing is you have to open Poseidra, because if you don't open Poseidra, then this deck is actually very weak going second. So yeah, that's another thing. But I think I'll put it up here. Maybe I'll put it at the top of here because I've actually lost like a bit of a faith in Mermail, just seen from like its wild different hand quality. Every time I've seen people like when I queue up against Mermail, it's like 50-50 whether I open like when I open 2 hand traps, it's like 50-50 whether I just handled myself for 2 and my hand did nothing, or my opponent literally, like, if not full out brick, they just lost like 1 impermanent, they just passed, and it's like, yeah, it's this deck that isn't as unstoppable as I initially thought it was, but it's still pretty toxic to play against. All of these other going first decks, I guess we'll just mention them now. So like, I'm putting Gimmick Puppet, the Drago Slayer, Pendulum, and Isoda Infernoble Knight, and like you could put plants, Rika 60 card plants with like Primite plants in here too. They're all like the same style of decks. The problem with these decks is that these decks are so obviously they're oppressive going first, but they have the issue of going second more so than something like Mermail, because at least Mermail has like Poseidra and has like room for a decent amount of non-engine. You have decks like Pendulum, Drago Slayer, which not only does it not have room for non-engine, it just can't go second at all. But yeah, well, not that it can't go second. Plus, yeah, it's no hand traps. What's so no room for hand traps? Jesus Christ, bro! It's like on words. And then you have like Gaming Hub, which ironically, Gaming Hub is kind of weird because Gaming Hub is like it's an FDK deck, but it's the deck that I felt like has like one of not like an oppressively high win rate going first, because there's just lots of hand traps being played right now that even though Gimmick Hub obviously it ignores oftentimes traditional hand traps like Imperm Veiler because of its field spell and stuff like that, and the fact that it has stuff like Terror Baby that makes your monsters unrespawnable and so on and so forth, so like not even Ash can stop it. But there are hand traps that not even Gimmick Puppet's custom protection cards can protect it from, which is stuff like Droll or stuff like Bestials or stuff like Bell or Crow. Like no matter what Gimmick Puppet opens, it really struggles to FDK through certain hand traps like that. At the same time, this is like one of these going first decks that has the most capability of going second, which is weird to say because it's like Mermail actually can be built to have a decent amount of non-engine hand traps going second, one, and two, it has Condolence Puppet, which is like a similar bomb going second to Mermail's Poseidra, where Condolence Puppet is like a painful choice, and you can painful choice for Terror Baby and like Bistal, and then make your monsters untargetable and unrespondable while going second, which is off of one card, which is actually kind of nuts. And then because you're going second, you don't have to FTK your opponent. You can just deal 8k the normal way, which is through battle. Well, yeah, I think Mermail is better than Gimmick Puppet, even though because Mermail Bestials are pretty popular. Bestials are dead cards versus Mermail, while Bestials are insane versus Gimmick Puppet. So that's like a huge difference. Like some of the top decks right now are playing a ton of Bestials, so that in itself it can be like a maybe even a tier difference as expressed here. But yeah, and then Momento. So before we get to the I guess the other two decks from the new pack, I want to talk about Momento. So Momento is also a disgusting going first deck, and if you didn't see my last video I made on Memento, they're now shifting to this card called number 67 Paradise Smashers, which is, for all intents and purposes, this is just VFD or it's rank 5 Shockmaster, however you want to look at it. Your opponent, you have a 93% chance to make your opponent basically make your opponent unable to use monster effects for your entire turn. You floodgate them, and while I know some people might say that seems a bit win more, like if you do your full Memento combo, shouldn't you win anyways? The answer is yes, but let's say in this specific environment, the World Championship Qualifiers, there is a lot of merit to just going through Paradise Smashers instead of doing your normal combo, because one, Paradise Smashers is quicker. Like a lot of Memento's combos is done during your opponent's turn too, where you're using all your interactions and you're using your quick plays and your poly monster, your reviving monster, and you're doing a lot of stuff. One, that risks your timer, so like the timer issue with Memento is a real thing, especially when you're playing through hand traps. And number two is that it just takes a while, whereas if you resolve Paradise Smashers, like the game is just over at that point. Like you don't have to worry about timing out, and your opponent oftentimes just leaves. They don't even try to play through it, so it makes your matches a lot quicker, a lot less stressful. And over a 72-hour period, we were grinding stage 2. That's actually a real tangible benefit potentially. And yeah, this deck also, unlike Mermail, Memento plays through Charmies pretty well too. So like the only hand trap that you can really use that guarantees stops Memento is Maxi. So like not even Fool Loss really does it, because one, if you get Fool Loss, you can Paradise Smashers anyways and then floodgate your opponent, so like the Fool Loss doesn't even matter. Or in like 2 to 3 draws even. Or you can give your opponent like 1 to 2 draws instead of an actual real end board with like multiple, like instead of having like 13 interruptions, you only have like 4 or 5. Like oh no, how will you survive? But yeah, the Memento, it's just, maybe it has a somewhat of an issue going second because it doesn't have room for the most non-engine. Maybe, but there are decks, Memento builds that are now actually cutting the Fiendsmith engine because they're playing Paradise Smashers now. You don't need the Fiendsmith engine's end board on top of your end board, because you're resolving a floodgate. Now you have room to run more non-engine, and you have space in the extra to run super poly as well, like Brandon. So yeah, I'm placing Memento very high. You might, this might be overdoing it a bit, but like you might be shocked by how high Memento actually ends up on this heroes at the end. But yeah, next Argo Stars. So Argo Stars, I know like Master Meta, or like not Master Meta. I know in the Challenger Cup, Argo Stars won, or not won. Argo Stars got second, quote unquote. Argo Stars. In that one Challenger Cup, the thing is that the way the Challenger Cup works is that you play it, like you know when you're going first or second. So the other deck that the second place finisher that played Argo Stars was playing was Fiendsmith Pride Knight. So like when you're like going like blind, or when you know you're going second, you're obviously going to be picking Fiendsmith Pride Knight. And then when you're going first, you get to pick Argo Star, the continuous trap deck that also plays D-Fish, although it only plays quote unquote only plays 3 floodgates. But the fact that it's a trap deck means that it benefits heavily from going first, and it also benefits heavily from not having to be played when you go second in the Challenger Cup. That's like the Challenger Cup format was like a unique instance where like a bunch of trap decks can actually be successful, much more successful than in a random best of one. Like for example, if you were asked me if you were planning to play Argo Stars in a best of one format in the World Championship qualifier to climb with, I would not. hell no, because the problem with Argo Stars is that when you go second, it's so rough as a trap deck, and you don't know when you're going first or second. Unlike in like the tournament settings, which were best of 3 and stuff like that, and you get to like change your deck too. But yeah, it's, I don't know. It's a trap that can play the Fiendsmith engine, so you know it has that going for it. Don't know if I would place it above Runic. I know Runic. This is gonna bite me in the ass. Like I know Runic stun. There's gonna be like at least 2 or 3 Runic stuns that top 100 in this Duelist Cup, and there's gonna be like 0 Mimighoul and 0 Argo Stars, and people are gonna be wondering like why I put this so low. But it's just that I think when you play stun, you play you play the other version of stun. But yeah, we'll get to that later. So the other new deck, quote unquote new deck from last month's pack, was P.U.N.K, the new rank 8 and the level 8 extended riding scale came off from that last pack, and these cards were very good. P.U.N.K is a deck that I didn't even consider relevant at all for like over a year now, and these cards do help address one of the biggest issues with P.U.N.K, which is the massive choke point on Rising card, like Rising card getting ashed or impermed, because now you have number one, you can easily make the rank 8 before you get the Rising card, and the rank 8 is a monster negate, so you immediately have a negate for something like an Ash or a Veiler on your Rising card already. And then Riding Scale also helps you extend further by helping you get to the rank 8 exceeds earlier, just because, you know, if you open any other P.U.N.K monster, or if you just open Zeoman, you can, you know, search this with search Rising Scale with Zeoman, and then summon the Rising Scale, get another extender from deck, and it gives you a lot more plays. It even helps you play through removal more often, because like one of the biggest weaknesses with P.U.N.K is like, obviously your normal summonable P.U.N.K monsters are ignition effects, not trigger effects when they're summoned, so they're very prone, very vulnerable to removal. But if they do get removed and you have Rising Scale, you can summon the Rising Scale and then, you know, get it back, and then, you know, you can still extend through removal. So it definitely helps there. I will say is that while technically the Rising Scale does, in theory, help the deck going second, the deck is still not good going second, especially engine-wise. It needs to still rely on non-engine to go second. And then here comes the bigger issue, is with the release of Rising Scale and of the Fiendsmith engine, which the Fiendsmith engine is also very good in P.U.N.K. P.U.N.K is one of the better decks to be able to play the Fiendsmith engine. The problem is that this deck suffers from too many good cards to play. So like now you have to include copies for like 2-3 Rising Scales plus like the 5-6 card plus Fiendsmith engine, and then suddenly it's like, wait, what happened to all my room from non-engine now? Like before, P.U.N.K could run like 15-16 plus non-engine, because frankly it didn't have a lot of better engine to run in the deck. But now it's like, I'm gonna bring up like Tosaku's deck list of when he played Punk, and it's shocking how little hand traps are actually in this deck, considering Punk is traditionally known as a deck that just was a non-engine hand trap spam deck. That one of the benefits was being able to run tons of non-engine. Well, I'm not even sure that's the case anymore, and if that isn't the case, then that still presents an issue with Punk, because now, even though the power level of the deck increased, the ceiling increased, the consistency increased, I'm not what the other huge problem with Punk was that it still struggled with going second. I don't know if like these cards help with going second enough to justify the loss of hand trap, which I personally believe is. I actually don't think this deck significantly improved going second, if at all now, because now it has to cut hand traps in order to run these cards, or you just roll well over 40, which still reduces your odds of drawing hand traps. But it's to be seen. I think this deck is still relevant though. Like I actually think it's actually potentially better than Spright. Like at least tier 3. I know I'm like shitting on it for all for problems going second, so on and so forth. But this deck does feel like really great going first. Like as long as you don't get max seed. But if you don't get max seed, this deck is actually way harder to stop right now. Between the Fiendsmith engine, between the Jam Fever to rank 8, and protecting your Revising Carp, it's so hard to stop this deck with hand traps now. At one time I threw 4 hand traps at this deck, and they still ended on like Caesar SP through 4 hand traps, and obviously like that's fucking insane. That's crazy. Yeah. Next, now that we're done with all the relevant decks from the 2 newest packs that are still in the shop, let's get to some of the tier 1 meta contenders, the best decks in the format. So I think that the best deck is Snake Eye, Fiendsmith, Millennium, Fiendsmith, Snake Eye. Who else isn't sick of this deck by now? Oh yeah, there is a ban list, and they put Bonfire from 2 to 1. You know, cool. The deck lost 1 starter, 1 extender. It's a hit, but obviously it by itself it's not going to do anything to the viability of the deck. And then the other hit was OSS, Original Symbol Spoils, from 3 to 1, which I initially thought was a big hit. And then the rating duels happened, then the season happened, and people started playing Millennium Fiends of Snake Eye still, and it's still, even with 1 OSS to not hit off the Zombie Vampire, with Original Symbol Spoils being the best hit off Zombie Vampire, you're still fine. You have like, the people are running double Lacrima now, because now if you use Zombie Vampire and you mill a level 4, so this could be a Mulch Army, this could be a Lacrima, or you could just mill any of your Snake Eyes cards with Bellstar already, which is like over half of your deck is still a good mill off the Zombie Vampire. You hit any of that, you can, at minimum you hit a level 4, you can go into a line with Flame Banshee without using Shiroza, by the way. You don't have to spend 3 extra deck slots on line as Shiroza to go through Flame Banshee. Now just playing 1 extra copy of Lacrima ensures that if you mill a rank 4, you can make a Flame Banshee with your off the Fiendsmith engine, which obviously Flame Banshee gets you your Snake Eyes engine. And then there's people who aren't even playing that. Like they don't even want to play a bridge for Fiendsmith and spend even the 1 extra slot, because frankly you don't need to. The deck is still consistent, because the Zombie Vampire can still hit. It can still hit like 40% of your deck, so like 70% of 70 I think it's still like over 70% chance that Zombie Vampire will still hit something relevant, even if you don't play any additional bridge from Fiendsmith into Snake Eye. The odds are still in your favor. And the worst case scenario is you play Fiendsmith Control with a bunch of hand traps, which is that is already a legitimate deck by itself, minus the Snake Eyes cards in this format already. So like your fallback plan, if you don't mill anything on the Zombie Vampire, is that you're playing like maybe like a top 5. You're still playing a top 5 deck in the format, at minimum a high tier 2 deck. If you get unlucky, this deck is still up there. I'm sure you don't need me to explain why this deck is still up there, but yeah. So other decks that can contend with Snake Eyes. So Blue Eyes, everybody's upset that Blue Eyes got hit. It's yeah, I understand. Like at the same time, Blue Eyes had such overwhelming play rate and win rate at one point. It was like either way, like somebody was going to be upset. Okay, it's going to be either the people playing Blue Eyes are going to be upset that you hit a deck that wasn't the best deck in the format, or other people are going to be upset that this deck is like clearly the most played deck at one point and the highest win rate, and how come you're letting it go scot-free? Like either way, like there's gonna be a massive group of people that's gonna be upset whether Blue Eyes got hit or not. So like let's just get that discussion out of the way. And like they hit the other top deck too. It's just that the other top deck, they didn't do a good job hitting it. I also don't think that the Blue Eyes hits for the most part really matter too much. One Sage, one Maiden. Like the Maiden, I guess, actually does hurt a little bit. The Sage, it's way more replaceable. Like honestly, it's like you'll be fine with 2 Sage. But it's the Maiden that now you'll have a less chance of drawing your best extender, which I understand is a real thing. It's why I'm considering like before the ban list, I had like these two as my top tier 1 decks. Now I'm considering putting Blue Eyes here. The reason I still think Blue Eyes is really high. Like I still think all of you are still like doomering about Blue Eyes too much. Even like first of all, there's no Ryu-Ge, there's no Malice in this world championship qualifier. Okay, they're not here yet. Okay, you don't have to worry about this deck actually getting power crept, because as we went over, the decks from the new pack don't actually do check, don't really factoring at all into the top tier decks of this format. So Blue Eyes, if you thought Blue Eyes was a top tier deck prior to the ban list, then you should still think Blue Eyes is a top tier deck post ban list, because the ban list honestly was not that massive of a hit to begin with. And the reason I'm pointing it out here is because Blue Eyes, I think Blue Eyes is still arguably, like in a way, you can say it's like maybe the best deck at going first in the game, which I know sounds a little blasphemous considering I already went over some of these degenerate going first decks like Mermail and like Momento, just shock mastering people at home. But the thing is that Blue Eyes has a very important quality that none of these other decks have, and that is that Blue Eyes can play through Max Seed. Okay, if Snake Eyes gets Max Seed, if Memento gets Max Seed, if Mermail gets Max Seed, like no matter how degenerate the hand is, if they don't have the Alpha Max Seed, they're still cooked going first. Well, maybe not cooked, but like they are significantly affected by Max Seed. Blue Eyes, on the other hand, can put up multiple points of interruption, giving only 1, if not 0, Max Seed draws, which is one of the reasons why like Blue Eyes was so good like to begin with. Because if Blue Eyes doesn't lose the Max Seed, that means there is not a single hand trap that actually stops Blue Eyes. You will, unless you just brick hard, which that is a possibility. Like Blue Eyes, that does happen, but I mean that also happens to other decks. But if you open any sort of playable hand, you will never lose the 1 hand trap ever. Like there is no single hand trap that will stop you, which is why Blue Eyes is so good at going first. You always establish at least 2 points of interaction. If not, like you can get through even more and get through your full board of like Spirit and like Majesty set and then Drill Beam and then so on and so forth. Your deck doesn't, you do not fear triple attack talents at all playing into your board, because you can just go Drill Beam, Majesty, and then like Imperm or Purge, and then it's like, oh, that's like 3 to 4 interruptions without using a monster effect. So like even if they have talents, it's not gonna do anything. So I still think this deck is super strong. Obviously, going second now, it's a bit rougher, but I mean, look, man, going second is hard in general in this game, and if you're going to go second, at least you're playing a deck that has 17 hand traps and has arguably space for the most hand traps in the meta still. So like it could be way worse off. Like you could be something like Voiceless Voice or like Crystron, for example. But yeah, I still believe in Blue Eyes. I'm no like a Seto Kaiba fanboy either. Like I generally hate playing against Blue Eyes because because when it feels very tough to beat going second. Like that's why I'm not a Blue Eyes fan whatsoever. That's what I still respect this as a potentially top tier deck still. Next, other potential top tier decks. So the other Primite deck, the Primite Fiendsmith deck, which also like I should mention Fiendsmith control too. So I'll discuss the Primite part first. Okay, so the other Primite deck is Primite Fiendsmith control, and for the longest time, well, not for the longest time, like just in general, I think Fiendsmith Primite control and Fiendsmith Primite control and Primite Blue Eyes are in general like they're like the same type of deck. They're just mid-rangey decks with tons of non-engine that happen to leverage the very strong Primite engine and on like a decent board, honestly. Like if they go uninterrupted, you have Primite plus your main engine, which is either Fiendsmith or Blue Eyes. That's still like 4 or 5 plus interruptions, plus non-engine. Like that's still good enough to win the game. And they happen to be decently resilient to hand traps. Although I think Blue Eyes is just like, I've always thought that Blue Eyes was just a stronger version of the Primite Fiendsmith engine, because Blue Eyes is better into the hand traps. Specifically, Maxi is the big one again, because like Maxi will hurt the Fiendsmith decks way more than it hurts the Blue Eyes decks. And also, like, they both these decks run bricks, but I guess the argument can be made that the bricks in the Primite Fiendsmith decks is like, this is like the one advantage I think the Primite Fiendsmith deck has over Primite Blue Eyes, is that the Primite Blue Eyes bricks are worse. Like, opening the True Light is not ideal. Opening the Blue Eyes White Dragon is terrible. There is no worse draw between both decks than Blue Eyes White Dragon, because Blue Eyes White Dragon doesn't do shit. Like it's literally, it helps you. It's a reveal for Drill Beam and Majesty. So it's like, that is the best case scenario. If you draw with another decent card, it cannot be a dead card. It could be like only a half dead card. But the bricks in Primite Fiendsmith, like, the brick is like Driver, which I guess, like, if you're running Driver, you're running it because you're playing Gamma. So like that's yeah, but like that's like the worst brick in the deck. The other brick is like Dippity or Lurie, which, worst case scenario, normal summon Dippity, normal summon Lurie, full Fiendsmith combo. Okay. If you cannot normal summon Blue Eyes and do full Blue Eyes combo, that doesn't work. But if you draw your vanilla in Primite Fiendsmith, that's honestly fine a lot of time, especially since you don't run that many normal summons to begin with, and especially since you can search Roar off of Primite Lordly Load as well. And yeah, and it has less bricks, so like Tract is an extender, Engraver's extender, like that is one general, like, actual benefit of playing Primite Fiendsmith control over Primite Blue Eyes. I still think that in the most hands where both decks open playable, I still think on average the Blue Eyes deck is stronger than the Primite Fiendsmith deck, but that could just be me. I know a lot of people will disagree with that. And yeah, this deck also probably popularly plays Bestials, but like Bestials are just, depending on how good you think Bestials are in the meta, how many Mermail decks and decks that Bestials aren't good against that you're expected to play in the World Championship Qualifier, that's up to you. You can also play Purge if you don't want to play Bestials, like, you have options there. But yeah, next, the other Fiendsmith control deck is just a straight up Fiendsmith control deck with Primite. I don't think this deck is particularly I'm like actually tempted to put it here in the Mermail range. So like the benefit of playing pure Fiendsmith control with like multiple Lacrima, or like people having normal summoning Tour Guide for Sangan now, they didn't, if you saw my video, they didn't steal it from me. Like I did not invent Tour Guide in the Sangan, okay? I just happened to randomly play Tour Guide in the Sangan in my Fiendsmith deck, but I did not come up with that. I didn't, like, don't try to like credit the Tour Guide tech to me, because I did not popularize that at all with my video or anything. But people realize that independent of my video. But yeah, Tour Guide in the Sangan is full Fiendsmith combo, plus you search Maxi and Ash. The thing is that this deck, it also has room for the most hand traps in the game, because you're not playing the Primite cards. So because of that, obviously you have more room for non-engine. The thing is that this deck does not put up a good end board at all. It puts up a Fiendsmith end board, which is a rank 6 plus Lacrima for Paradise to send Desiree as a send on your opponent's turn. So that's like 2 to 3 points of interruption at most, depending on how much you want to count Caesar as. And that's it. That's your end board. You don't have Primite stuff. You don't got Drill Beam. You don't have Primite Roar. You don't have anything else. You don't even make it, like, don't even really make that. I don't even think there's like a way to make the board that much better. Like, at most, if you draw a 2-card combo and you don't get interrupted, you can maybe end on Desiree with a Paradise on field. So for like a full board sense, for like 3 points of interaction instead of like 2. But yeah, that is a major problem in this deck. And I've realized when playing this deck, especially when I play Bestials in it, because you want to play Bestials in this deck, because like you need high value cards, because your ceiling is so low. You play against a deck that can play through Bestials, it doesn't feel good at all. Like, short of resolving Maxi, it's like your opponent plays through your board like butter. Like, imagine making Caesar and your opponent activates Sank Engine. Okay, so one Sank Engine breaks your entire Fiendsmith board. if you make Caesar. That's how like vulnerable your setup is, and like it's not like hand traps are gonna help you much better than, because a Sang engine is like at worst at worst case scenario it gets ashed and then it's or ogre, then it's traded 1-for-1. But yeah, decks will play through your end board like it's nothing at this point, especially if they're common and combo decks. So it's like you need to, even when you make your end board, you still have to rely on drawing specifically correct non-engine. It's like, it just feels, overall it feels less, it feels worse than the Primite Fiendsmith deck. Because at least the Primite Fiendsmith deck, if you go first and you go uninterrupted, you at least can say you have a decent enough board to stop your opponent. Like if your opponent has all gas and they didn't hand trap you once while you're playing the pure Fiendsmith control deck, you're actually really sweating, because they can easily break your board with all gas. So yeah, that's why I'm playing this here. I don't think this is I think if you're playing Fiendsmith control, I think you just suck it up and play the bricks and just play the Primite version. And first, okay, so I put Dragon Link here. So Dragon Link, this is just gonna be my tier list. I don't think anybody else is gonna even mention Dragon Link on the tier list, but specifically, like the build I showed on my channel was and Trish showed on his channel was Primite, Bistio, Dragon Link. So this is like a combination of all the 3 previous decks I mentioned, which is like Primates plus Bistios plus Dragon combo slop of way more combo. It's Dragon Link combo instead of Dragon Synchro like Blue Eyes is. But yeah, the thing is that when you combine like the Primate engine with the Bistios, and then in like a 60 card deck with the Dragon Link card, you get the weakness. You get like the weaknesses of all of these decks, of these previous decks, which is that you got a deck that's weak into Maxi. You got a deck that's highly matchup dependent, because you're playing so many Bistios because you need to use the Bistios as extenders. But if you then play against a deck that doesn't care as much about Bistios, like a lot of these down here, like for example Spright or Mermail, or honestly even Mannadium Fiendsmith Snake Eyes, if they don't start Fiendsmith engine, they can honestly ignore Bistios a lot of time. Yeah, it's rough if you play a matchup where Bistios can't like solo or like hard carry you. You also have the Primite problem where you're running bricks for the Primite engine, and you're also a normal summon reliant deck now like Blue Eyes, because Primite, if you normal summon Primite Effort Barrel, you got to realize that Primate Effort Barrel is not a light or dark monster, so that gets removed. It doesn't even like fill your grave for like your other extenders like your Baby Dragons or your Bistios. And yeah, it's just honestly, this deck has the advantage of this deck is that it plays good cards. It plays like Bistios, which are good. It plays Primite cards, which are, if you want to play the Primite cards are good quality cards, and so on and so forth. The problem is that it's probably the worst deck at playing those cards. So yeah, we're gonna put this down here. I don't know if it's better than Mimighoul, but the thing is that at least Dragon Link can play through most hand traps, whereas like Mimighoul can maybe struggle with this. I'll put this here. This may be a better description of the power level of Mimighoul than it is of Dragon Link, but yeah. Okay, next I guess we can have the stun discussion now. So I don't think stun has been good since the last Duelist Cup. It was not even good during the last Duelist Cup, I'm gonna be honest, but it's only gotten worse and worse as we've gotten new card releases in Master Duels. Mainly because what's come out since the last Duelist Cup is Primate cards. Primate cards completely destroy any stun strategy you have. This goes for Ryu-Ge as well, okay? Because Drill Beam goes crazy. So Drill Beam is a recyclable way to out any problematic floodgate you have, whether it be a monster or spell trap card, and it's recyclable. It comes back every turn. That destroys. That simply destroys stun, a deck that doesn't generate advantage and only tries to, basically win off of certain specific floodgates, which just get, mauled by Drill Beam. Also, Blue Eyes sees more play. This deck has you're not winning matchups going first or going second against any of its most top tier decks anyways, but like especially against, look at the up here, against Blue Eyes, you have a 0% win rate going second. Against like Primite Fiendsmith, you probably have like a close to 0% win rate going second. Against Momento, unless they go for the mean Paradise Smasher run, even if they go for Paradise Smasher, they still can have the option for Guardian Chimera. It's still rough to go against even Momento. because of the threat of Guard Chimera and so on and so forth. And then, you know, branded like normal summon Fossey Dyna get mirror dated. Okay, cool. The end phase Chaos Star Swords, end phase Guardian Chimera. Like what are you gonna do to that? So yeah, it's only gone. The meta has gotten so bad for stun and back row decks in general, but like stun especially, because stun just cannot handle drill beam. It also can't handle. It can't, like, Blue Eyes has like 3 separate cards that just solo stun. It's like insane. It has drill beam. It has a Majesty, which just pops like 2 to 3. Well, it pops 2. You should never be popping 3 cards of Majesty. Whoa, hold on. There's in the dice rally, and also like Lightstorm Dragon tagging out Spirit into Lightstorm Dragon to pop back even more back row. Like you set 5 and then all your back row's gone in the end phase. Like, yeah, I would say it's just marginally better than Runic, because at the very least, if you go first, you put them on a clock. Whereas Runic, it's like hope you manage to drill beam forehead, I guess. And yeah, and in light of that, I guess I'll just talk about the other prominent back row deck, which is Labrynth. I know that like we just went from this discussion about stun into Labrynth. I realize Labrynth is not stun. It's very different. Even the super heavy trap builds that run like floodgates, still I would consider a far cry from pure stun. But yeah, Labrynth faces the same problem though at the end of the day, because it's a trap deck, and especially it had a really bad Blue Eyes matchup going second, like really bad. I guess with less Blue Eyes, it's gotten more manageable. Although with the increased play rate of Bystials, I don't think playing Furniture Lab is really well advised either, because like if you play against a Bystial matchup, like you're just putting the back foot. Like your furnitures might as well not exist, because they're just gonna get Bystialed. But yeah, if you play a trap heavy version, the trap heavy version really struggles going second now against all the drill beams, against all the decks making Guardian Chimera and stuff like that, or like like popping your shit in the end phase. But I guess if you just pray and you hard draw Lord of the Heavenly Prison, I guess that's potentially a way, although that doesn't even work against decks that like make Appaloosa. So like it's I was wrong about Lab last Duelist Cup. I put Lab low tier 3 when in fact it was like one of the better decks to play for the event that wasn't Snake Eyes. But now the decks, I feel like the meta decks have gone even worse, have become even worse matchups for Labrynth, even worse than Fiendsmith, Millennium, Snake Eyes. As hard as like ridiculous as that sounds to say, that there are decks that are worse for you to play against than the best deck in the format. But yeah, the Labrynth, like, I really don't believe in Labrynth right now. I really don't, but I'm open to be proven wrong. It's just, regardless of which build you play, there's like a bunch of tier 1 decks or tier 2 decks. I only put 1 deck in tier 1, but there's a bunch of decks tiered higher than you that are just playing cards that just counter any back row strategy. Yeah, we'll put Labrynth for here for now. And yeah, to round out some more tier 2 decks, so Azamina, White Forest, and Ubell, I consider these like similar decks, type decks, that these are the Fiend Slop combo decks that are the other Fiends and combo decks that aren't Snake Eyes and I guess aren't P.U.N.K. So I feel like they have the similar terms of viability and like the playstyle, which is just 1 card, 2 card combos, do your entire line, bridge into Fiendsmith, end on a literally unbreakable board of like 5-6 plus negates, interruptions, and then like just win the game off that. So like short of getting Max Seed or like Charmead, like you're probably gonna win when you go first, and then so it's not too dissimilar from these other decks. And these decks, among all of these going first broken combo decks, these I guess have among the most room for non-engine, and I like these better than Mermail, because Mermail has a wide variance of the quality of like starters it has. Some hands will play through 5 hand traps, some will play through no hand traps. Meanwhile, all of the starters in like a Ubell and White Force Azamina are relatively similar in their like quality. Like they all get to an FTK end board when they resolve, so like it doesn't matter which starter you start with a lot of time. You just you just if you open 2 and you play through any hand trap, and then you just go to town. I will say so Ubell, I think Ubell, I guess Ubell I can consider better, although these are roughly similar in my mind. Ubell does run a bit more bricks, but yeah, that's why it's down here and why it's not up here, and it has a bigger vulnerability to the Charmies and yeah, specifically Fulos and like Maxi. Like, all these decks lose to Maxi, but like Fulos and Purrely also hurt Ubell, which I guess Purrely isn't really played, so that's not that big of a deal. But yeah, drawing the high level Ubells, drawing the Unchained cards, these are not ideal. You could play the Millennium Engine with it, so with Ubell to mitigate the bricks, because then it's like, oh yeah, where you draw the brick, you just put those monsters in the graveyard, and then you put the monsters back in your deck for Phantom, and it's like nothing ever happens. So like, I actually really like playing the Millennium Engine with Ubell, although I feel like not everyone feels the same way about me, or feels the same way as I do. But yeah, and then White Forest is like, this deck does not see play properly at all. I've not seen a single person play this deck properly. Like, you guys gotta send these White Forest players like by video, or the White Forest combo guide spreadsheet, or like whatever, because like not a single person I've seen actually do the right combo, which is bridge Fiendsmith into White Forest with Rextremende, or like even just discard a Stellar and ride with Spright Elf and then deal the town. I've seen a bunch of people playing toy shit still in White Forest, which is like, you're not like, if you're playing Azamina cards, like multiple Azamina cards of Deception in White Forest, like multiple Twitch or multiple Deception, like you're behind. But if you're playing Toy Box still in White Forest, you are so far behind that like you might as well just you need a time machine to catch up at this point. Like the toy cards are not it. They do not bridge into anything. They're only good if you draw them with other White Forest cards, which at that point, if you do that, like that, yeah, don't play the toy box cards in White Forest if you want to grind this deck seriously. But I think this deck is still, it's a strong Fiendsmith combo deck that just nobody knows how to play properly, apparently. I will continue to put it up here because in my opinion, a well played White Forest deck is about as scary as a well played Ubell deck when you go second. But yeah, next is Fire King Snake Eyes, and some people have been playing Fiendsmith and Fire King Snake Eyes too, although that's, the deck building gets really weird at that point. I've pretty much just cut the Azamina cards from the Fire King list, because honestly, the Azamina cards are just kind of, they're just kind of bad in Master Duel. Like, there's so many hand traps floating around, and then you're just going minus every time you activate Azamina cards. It's like it's win more, because like if they resolve, that means your opponent had no hand traps for you to begin with, and in which case you don't need the extra Omni Negate most of the time from the Azamina cards if your combo resolves anyway. So like, yeah, there's no need to risk going minus into hand traps. That's why I will say every single good Millennium Fiendsmith player is playing, every good Fiendsmith Snake Eyes player is playing Millennium and not Azamina for a reason. So yeah, that's also why I'm not playing Azamina Fire King anymore. This is just straight up Snake Eyes Fire King, potentially with a small Fiendsmith package, but also sometimes with not. I think this deck is, the thing is that this deck is just kind of just a worse version of Millennium Fiendsmith Snake Eyes. Even though it's a worse version of the best deck in the format, is obviously still a good deck, but this deck plays more bricks, more engine requirements, has less room for hand traps, has slightly less starters, a lower ceiling end board, although the end board is still strong. Like, all of these, if this deck didn't exist, it's like this deck, Fire King Snake Eyes, would be like still, I think, maybe considered one of the top decks, maybe even top 5 or something. But like, because Millennium Fiendsmith Snake Eyes exists, like there's not much point if you're trying to be competitive, you're trying to play the best deck, or like as good of a deck as possible for the World's Qualifiers. There's not much of a reason to pick Fire King Snake Eyes over Millennium Fiendsmith Snake Eyes. So yeah, it is what it is. Speaking of a slightly worse version of a deck, Rescue Ace is just there's one interaction I mentioned in my last winner's video, but sometimes the matchup versus Fiendsmith control is really bad because Fiendsmith control always puts the Paradise in Grave, which sends the Desiree when you special summon. And the problem with that is that they can, at will, if you activate Fire King Island, anytime you special summon, you are at risk of them sending Desiree to send your Fire King Island. And then when your Fire King Island gets sent, your whole board gets nuked. So it's really awkward to play into a Fiendsmith control deck that has a Paradise Engrave, which they almost always will because that's just how the deck is built. It's like you can't activate Fire King Island, even with Sanctuary Protection, because Desiree sends, not destroys. So it's like, you kind of gotta try to bait it out without using your Fire King Island, which is really hard because there's no way to bait it out. There's no good way to really bait it out, and yeah, it's like you're giving yourself in order to try to not auto lose to a board wipe that they have an option of just because you play Fire King Island in your deck. It's a bit rough in that regard, but yeah, that's also another reason why I put it down here, because it has out of all these decks, this has like probably the poorest matchup against the Fiendsmith control and Fiendsmith Primite control, because you can also Primite Drill Beam the Fire King Island, which is bad. You can Purge the Fire King Island, which is also bad. Like Jesus. Yeah. So what was I saying? Yeah. Speaking of poor versions of decks, so here's the Rescue Ace. So Rescue Ace is like if Fire King Snake Eyes is the worst version of Millennium Fiends and Snake Eyes, Rescue Ace is just the worst version of Fire King Snake Eyes, because the Rescue Ace and Fire King Snake Eyes are remarkably similar. Like, they're both fire decks that abuse, like, the generic fire extension tools, like the Snake Eyes cards, although less so with Rescue Ace. Rescue Ace is mainly just Die Bellstars and Bonfire, which is got limited, so that's actually a big deal for Rescue Ace, because unlike in every other Snake Eyes deck, Poplar is not full combo in Rescue Ace, only Bonfire is, because if you open Poplar, you need your normal summon from Airlifter to actually do something. That's why Bonfire into Poplar works, because you can preserve your normal summon, but Poplar by itself, you need to draw another Rescue Ace monster, so Poplar is only a 2-card combo to get to your Rescue Ace combo set, Turbulence set 4. So yeah, the Bonfire limit was actually kind of rough, and yeah, there's just if there was not much reason to play Fire King Snake Eyes or Millennium Fiends and Snake Eyes, there's even less reason to play Rescue Ace over Fire King, because it's like the only reason would be that Rescue Ace is slightly better into Maxi, because you can, if you get Maxied or Fool Lost, or I guess Shifted or Drooled, which Shifter's not really in the format right now that much, but you can just Turbulence set 4 for like 2 Maxi draws, which is like, I guess that is like the one reason to play Rescue Ace over Fire King. That's probably the only reason I would say. I mean, it's the deck, again, it's good. It's a fire deck that plays Snake Eyes cards. It plays Peruvian Princess and Zealand's OTK. And like, you can OTK off 3 monsters. You can, like, you have extension, you can dodge it targeted negation like Impermanent and Valor with your in archetype engine card, which for Fire King is Kieran, but for Rescue Ace is Rescue. You have 3 arrows, like, you have the 1-card combo, you have like everything. It's just that all of it just feels like slightly worse than, or a bit worse than Fire King Snake Eyes. And also you have a weakness to board breakers, whereas Fire King Snake Eyes does not really care about board breakers at all, for the most part, and Rescue Ace does care very heavily about Duster and Lightning Storm. So yeah, I'm putting this down here just because, like, nobody's gonna play Rescue Ace either, because it's not a very popular deck. I can tell based on the views on my Rescue Ace videos, and it's also just worse than like the 2 other fire decks that are being played. Also, I worse than the 3 other fire decks being played. Because next we got Tenpai and Striker. So first of all, Striker. I know there's an anime floating around. Okay, here's the thing. Okay, the anime did not show the best Sky Striker Ace, the best Sky Striker monster. The best Sky Striker monster is Chandra. Okay, it's not Ace, it's not Ray, it's not Rose, it's Chandra. Okay, so yeah, we'll put Striker down here. The best way to play Striker is by taking out the Sky Striker monsters and putting in the Tenpai monsters. And I'm sorry, Sky Striker fans. It's just like, as sad as that is to sound, like, it's best to use your board breakers and your Sky Striker cards to draw into your Tenpai cards and OTK your opponent in 1 turn, as opposed to playing a grind game with Striker and then losing your opponent's follow-up because Sky Striker can't OTK through a board. But yeah, that's not. That's obviously that's the only way to play Tenpai. You can play Tenpai without board breakers. You can play Tenpai not just like 30 spells like Sky Striker Tenpai. You can play Tenpai in a few ways. You can play it like the normal hand trap build. It's still fine because at the end of the day, no other deck plays more hand trap than you do. You also can play Fiendsmith Tenpai, Fiendsmith Bistio Tenpai, which is like the perk of that is that one, now you get to play games going first, which you know, that was the one thing with Tenpai is that Tenpai, there's no easy games because you were always going second and you were always waiting for your opponent. Especially if you're playing Striker Tenpai, you always wait your opponent, and that's really annoying in the Duelist Cup and World Championship Qualifiers format because you're sitting through like a 5-10 minute combo every game, and you're willingly choosing to sit through that. That's what you're doing when you're playing Striker Tenpai. That's why I really do not have the mental to play Striker Tenpai for stage 2 of the World's Qualifiers. But you know, if you do, you know, you do you. It has a good matchup against some decks. That's a terrible matchup versus Momento though. It has a terrible matchup versus decks versus. Okay, so it's a weird matchup versus Millennium Fiend Snake Eye. You would think that you would match up well against Millennium Fiend Snake Eye, but Millennium Fiend Snake Eye is the one deck in the game that runs 3 droll because it wants to droll itself. So if you're playing Striker Tenpai, you get drolled. Like you're kind of cooked there too. So that's kind of yeah. Also, you make Mermail go first. You feel like a dumbass. You make any of these like FTK decks, pseudo FTK decks go first. You're like, or you make a Ubell deck or like a White Force deck, a full combo go first. You're like, why am I doing this to myself, right? When I could just play hand traps and like probably save myself a bunch of time. But obviously Tenpai is still it's still common. The main reason Tenpai fell off was because of Blue Eyes. Because Blue Eyes matchup is like the one matchup which is like it's so bad. Like even like it's the one non-FTK matchup that's so bad for Tenpai. But if you do expect Blue Eyes to drop in playability because of hype dying down and the ban list, then you can see a resurgence of Tenpai coming back. And what did I say anything about Tenpai Fiendsmith? Oh yeah, the Fiendsmith Bistio. It means that you know how the scariest part of Tenpai is when they Magnum at you and then they end phase search Genroku. Okay, well if you play Tenpai Fiendsmith Bistio, you run 3 Ubellion. Now you have like 4 times as much access to your Magnum to search Genroku in the end phase. So yeah, that's really annoying ass deck, even though it's like you think going first Tenpai. Well, going first Tenpai with Magnum legal and seals and like Ubellion is like still like it still runs tons of hand traps. Like and unlike the Fiendsmith control version, Tenpai Fiendsmith can end the game really quickly too. So it's yeah, also not as vulnerable to Bistios because the Tenpai cards. But yeah, next is okay, so we got a few decks that I don't believe in right now. That like I get this next row could just be summed up with decks that I generally don't believe in for the most part. Maybe that's a bit hard. Maybe not Block Dragon. So Block Dragon is actually out of all these decks, I think the Block Dragon decks might be the ones I'm the biggest fan of. So like Block Dragon, I guess I should have included Block Dragon with these other decks, the generally going first decks. Block Dragon decks are another flavor of degenerate combo deck going first, where you get access to Block Dragon and you don't get maxed and you don't get drolled. Your opponent is cooked because you just build an unbreakable board. Any flavor of unbreakable board you want. You like I think now people are going for like Herald, Dweller, some other stuff with like Attack Crusader. Basically like oh yeah, and a Baron. There's some people playing that beast. There's just like 20 different million ways to build an unbreakable board with Block Dragon. Like you really get creative with doing that. So yeah, it's another one where when you go second versus this deck, you're just cringing the whole time. But I think has capability. I think that this is probably overdoing it. But like unlike these decks, I think the Block Dragon deck is closer to Mermail than it is to these decks here because it doesn't have the Bistio weakness that that the gimmick puppet deck. I'm blanking. The gimmick puppet deck has. It also has room for non-edging, quote unquote. It has room because you play a 60 card build with a lot of people are playing 60 card builds with Block Dragons for their block dragon decks, which obviously when you play 60 cards, you have more room to put hand traps in there. I'm still not sure if 60 is completely correct because it reduces your outs to max C, which is like one of the only hand traps that stops you going first. But I mean, this deck is doing well in Master Duel meta because this deck has a very dedicated player base, and Verna cards. Verna cards are like a big contributor to why this deck doesn't lose the hand traps, because like in Term Valor or like even Ash, because you have so much extension and you have so much access to Block Dragon, either through Verna or through Xeno Guitar, through Gallant Grand Knight, through all that stuff. Like you get access to Block Dragon, doesn't matter what the hell you do at that point, you're probably winning. So yeah, it's just like this deck, you probably won't see this deck being played unless it's being played by some dedicated player, in which case, if you do face off against Block Dragon, you're probably going to get smashed because their opponent's going to know what they're doing, and you probably win second. So, yeah, there's this funny Reddit post, shout out to Reddit, I guess, that sums up a lot of people's opinions of this deck, so yeah. And yeah, now onto decks that I don't believe in. So Kashira, I do not believe in Kashira. It's the best way to play Kashira is to play Kashira Unicorn in other decks, in better decks. Like play Kashira cards in Primite decks, or not Primite, or play Kashira monsters in like Fiendsmith decks or Snake Eye decks or White Forest decks. Don't play Kashira in its own archetype. That's its own archetype. It's not consistent enough. It's like Ryu-Ge. It's like playing pure Ryu-Ge. You feel like you have a deck that lacks a bunch of starters, but your Floodgate and Pop is in one monster, so I guess it's easier to get to a Rise Heart, which is still legal in Master Duel, as opposed to getting to Varudras plus the D-Fissure continuous spell in Ryu-Ge. But I mean, that's all. That's like one of the few things Kashira has going for it, like that it's better than pure Ryu-Ge. Like come on. And Flu, which I'm not even convinced is better than pure Ryu-Ge. I'm gonna be honest. You don't really see much Flu at all. In fact, I'm tempted to put Flu down here, which makes it arguably like maybe the worst deck that I'm gonna cover in this tier list, which just sounds a bit harsh. The one thing I'm looking at is like, if Argo Stars being up here is like throwing me off, but like I know I'm gonna get tons of complaints for not putting Argo Star higher because of its placement in Master Duel meta, and it's like the Challenger placement. But yeah, that's how little I want to talk about Flu right now. I'm talking about fucking Argo Stars right now. They're in the Flu section because this deck is just, I don't trust it. It still only has one map. It's still really inconsistent. It's still terrible going second. It's not even arguably good going first anymore. Yeah, people are playing Drolls too. Specifically, the most played deck in the game, or not the most played deck, but like the best deck in the game, in my opinion, is playing the Drolls now. So I guess good luck with that. People aren't playing as many Charmies as before, so like they don't have as many dead cards in hand. And even the Tenpai matchup, like the Tenpai deck is playing the type of Tenpai build that like shits on Flu and let the board breaker Tenpai. I played against this deck like once a season, and it's never done anything against me because it's either bricks or like it lost to a hand trap. So yeah, Flu might be the deck that I trust the least for this world's meta. Next is Melodious. So here's the thing about Melodious is Melodious. Something I didn't realize, that Melodious is kind of bricky sometimes. It's kind of low on 1-card starters. It has like 9 or maybe 12 1-card starters if you really squint. It has a bunch of like 1.5 2-card combos with multiple Melodious monsters, but you don't run a lot of Melodious names to begin with because you need hand traps to go second. And I think hand traps are where this deck excels in the most, because this deck has arguably maybe the best. Melodious has maybe arguably the best hand trap lineup in the game, which is what's it called? It has access to Herald of the Orange Light plus Purge, and those are Herald of the Orange Light especially is like one of the best hand traps because it removes a body too, which is very important. Just because removing bodies now Now that's so important because the Fiendsmith is in the game. Any 2 bodies is full Fiendsmith combo. So if you even oftentimes if you hand your opponent like Valor and Infirm, like on the Snake Eyes for example, they can just summon any Millennium monster, summon any well, like I guess Millennium's a bad example, but like summon any monster, like fucking summon a Bistio, still go with full Fiendsmith combo through an Infirm. Whereas if you go Herald of the Orange Light, it makes it exponentially harder to go in the Fiendsmith combo if you remove the body instead of just negating it by keeping the body on field. It's also ridiculous versus the Primite decks, especially Primite Blue Eyes, because you not only like negate the effort barrel, so you can feel free to negate the effort barrel. Usually when you have a hand trap versus like Blue Eyes and it's like Infirm or Valor, it's like you kind of have to just let the effort barrel resolve because you want to negate the spirit of Eyes of Blue in order to cut them off of Blue Eyes card. But then you have to deal with a Drill Beam at all times. It feels bad hand trapping that deck. Whereas if you have Herald of the Orange Light, feel free to negate the shit out of the effort barrel. It's gonna remove the body, so they can't. Not only do you stop them from searching Drill Beam, you stop them from linking off into Spirit of Eyes of Blue, which is like a huge deal. So like this I love this deck's hand trap. It's just weakness to back roll decks is a thing with Melodious. It doesn't have much ways to interact with back row, or it doesn't have any way to interact with back row. Loses the Maxi. It's somewhat inconsistent because it has a low amount of 1-card starters. But I love the Purge. It's just probably the best deck that can run both Purge and Herald of the Orange Light. Probably the other deck is like Madoche, and I think Melodious is better than Madoche. Although it is weak to Bistios too, which is being played now, so it's a bit weird. I can see it anywhere from here to here. This deck, it's okay. It's definitely a competent deck. And next is Chimera Illusion Fiendsmith. So I think out of all the Fiendsmith combo decks, I think this is the worst one. Like, obviously compared to Millennium Fiendsmith Snake Eyes, but also the Ubell and White Forest, and even P.U.N.K to a degree. P.U.N.K like is sort of a Fiendsmith combo deck now, and I think this is just worse than even P.U.N.K. It has similarly low amounts of room for non-engine. I think it has the lowest room for non-engine out of all of these Fiendsmith decks. Don't even get me started on its compared to like Fiendsmith control decks, but yeah, that's why this deck struggles going second. Its board is like, honestly, it's not even that great compared to like because you would think a deck that runs so much engine, has so much little room for non-engine, is just playing all gas would make an impressive end board, but its end board it's definitely not better than what Momento can do, and I don't even feel like it's better. It has a higher ceiling than Ubell or White Forest. So if you're playing the deck that not only has a lower ceiling, but also has to run more engine requirements to achieve a lower ceiling, it makes it feel like makes me feel like the deck doesn't seem that worth running. Even though, like, obviously you go first, you don't get max C. Like, you do play the hand traps, but that goes for like pretty much every Fiendsmith combo deck. So that's nothing unique to Chimera. So I can put it down here. I think P.U.N.K is like also better because P.U.N.K has similarly low amounts of room for non-engine, but it also like I don't know. It's like a give or take whether P.U.N.K or Chimera is higher, but I can see either way. But definitely a tier lower than the better Fiendsmith combo decks. Mathmech. Oh boy, this Mathmech. Bichos are being played. Mathmech does not run as many hand traps as you think it does. Like, it actually has quite a lower room for hand trap than you would think. It has more than the P.U.N.K builds I showed in like Chimera, but it's nothing to write home about. Okay, it's like nothing compared to the likes of Fiendsmith decks or Blue Eyes decks in terms of the amount of hand traps they can run. It's also like, even though there are a lot of Fiendsmith decks here, Mathmech gets hurt by Bichos more than the Fiendsmith decks. So that's rough. And also weakness to Max C. It's like I don't really believe in Mathmech right now. It doesn't help really work that well going second either. So because of its only average amount of non-engine slots. So yeah, I could even see can I see Melodious better than Mathmech? Well, Mathmech has like 3 mining now and 3 small worlds, so it does have a lot of access to circular now, and obviously if you go circular and you dodge Max E, then it is unsolvable still, so it has that going for it going first, but I it's not the only deck that wins going first. So like that's not even that really much of a niche anymore. But yeah. Next, Millennium. It's just straight up Millennium. Okay, so I don't know how to feel about this deck. This deck, I don't feel like it got better or worse. I think it's like stayed the same. Does it have a bad Blue Eyes matchup? It's like a 50-50. It's bad going second, good going first. Like that's pretty much the same how to say about Millennium compared to like literally every other deck, is that Millennium has a good win rate going first because it hand traps, like what are hand traps versus your 18 one-card starters, plus like doesn't care about max E, plus you know can run non-engine on its own, plus has synergy with Floodgate. Going second, not as good, not so good. So yeah, I don't quite know where to place the Millennium Fiendsmith now. We'll put it. I think it's better than Mathmech, so we'll put this as the dividing line for tier 3. How about that? Unless one of these decks is, I think, is worse, which might just be the case. So Tearlaments, this is another deck. Probably along with Mathmech is probably the deck that's hurt the most by the increased usage of Bestials being played. So that's the thing. This deck got hurt the most by the Beatrice ban. But although that was honestly that tier list, that was a while ago for like a previous tier list. But yeah, don't really have faith in Tearlaments. It's a deck that still struggles going second now because it's similar to Branded. It kind of has a weird amount of like a low amount of room for hand traps. Fiendsmith Engine is like there's better decks to play the Fiendsmith Engine in that do more off the Fiendsmith Engine than just to get like a mill 6 off Pilgrim Reaper, or mill 5 off Pilgrim Reaper. Sorry, not even 6. Yeah, I don't really trust Tier, to be honest. I'm gonna put it here. I think there used to be a time where like Tier and Brandon were just like connected to each other on the tier list because they were just two different types of fusion decks that ultimately had like a similar weaknesses and so forth, and like similar strengths. Now it's like I really don't have the faith in Tier. You have to like dodge all the decks that play Bestials, and then even then, decks that don't play Bestials are still gonna rock you going first because you don't have the room for hand traps. And meanwhile, like Momento is gonna do his Memento things. You have a good matchup against Tenpai at least. I guess that's something to write home about because you have disruption in the graveyard like Snow and Shovelers. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm struggling to find positive things to say about here at this point. I'm gonna be honest. Sorry, Jesse. Purrely. White Cat got the 3. This is the last time. This is the last time I even talked about Purrely. That's also Purrely is like the deck that's. It is what it is at this point. You can combine Purrely with other stuff. I've seen Purrely Fiendsmith. I don't think any combination of Purrely, or I don't think any hybrid Purrely build is better than just straight up playing Purrely, because the benefit of playing Purrely is that you have room for hand traps, and you bake Noir, and lots of decks are cutting out the Noir because you know who the fuck plays an out to a monster that doesn't exist in the meta, right? That because Purrely sees very little plays, but you can take that to your advantage then, because then people are going to be ill prepared to actually deal with Purrely and trying to out with the big Noir. So you can go first and you can play through hand traps. You can open like Street to block Imperm and Valor, and yeah, you can definitely still win games with this deck. You still draw 4 to 6 cards during your opponent's turn. You go first, this deck is fine. You go second, this deck plays more hand traps than most decks. It's a formula for a decent deck. This deck isn't even bad going. Like its engine is okay going playing the board too, just because of happiness and like you know happiness OTK is a thing, but like just straight up just ramming your monsters into your opponent's monsters when you go second is like a huge swing. So no pun intended. Yeah, I have more faith in Purrely than most other people. Obviously, I'm putting it above Tier because Purrely also doesn't really get hurt by Bestials, so that's a thing. And yeah, next is Centurion. So Centurion is a deck that I just do not have faith in. It's like much like how Chimera is like the worst of the Fiendsmith combo decks. I think Centurion is the worst of like the mid-range type of decks, the decks that play Bystials and so on and so forth. Like, I think it's worse than, it's a worse version of Blue Eyes, it's a worse version of Primeite Fiendsmith, it's a worse version of actual Bystial Fiendsmith, it's a worse version of Tenpai Fiendsmith. It's yeah, it's the deck that's the most vulnerable to getting interrupted. It's the weakest going second. It can use Bystials the best because it can actually makes use of Bystials to synchro summon during your opponent's turn. But you only put up like a few points of interruption, and like you don't have many starters in Centurion as well. You're prone, especially with Bonfire going from 2 to 1. That was like an unironic hit to the Centurion. You can play the Fiendsmith Centurion build, but if you're playing the Fiendsmith Centurion build, you're just going from like the 5th worst, like you're going from like the 6th best mid-range Bystial deck to like the 7th best Fiendsmith deck, because all the Fiendsmith deck does is enable you to make a Premier or Primus using the Fiendsmith engine if it goes uninterrupted, so you have more starters that way. But then you cut hand traps, and then this deck already struggles going second as it is, and then you want to cut more hand traps. I don't know. It already runs less hand traps than Blue Eyes to begin with, and it puts up less interruptions. So yeah, I don't really have faith in Centurion. And it also has to depend on facing a matchup where Bystials are good against, because you need to, more than any other deck up here, you need to run Bystials in Centurion. That's like the whole point of, like the whole main benefit of playing Centurion is that it synergizes best with the Bystials. But you then play against the Mermail deck, or you even just queue against the Snake Eyes deck that opens Mannadium engine, and you're like, well, nice, man, this Bystial in my hand is really gonna carry me this duel, right? Not. And next is last is Ritual Beast, like Jesus Christ. So Ritual Beast is like another one of these. It's another one of these go first type decks. Although Ritual Beast, it finally fell out of the highest win rate decks according to the official stats. So yeah, I guess I guess Ritual Beast is washed now. Sag. This deck is like, among all of the decks that are known for being scary going first, I think Ritual Beast is like the one out of maybe that's like possibly the worst at going second. It can't win going second obviously against the combo decks, but I see it struggle even to deal with the Fiendsmith decks, the control decks that don't actually put up an impressive board. Although I guess Caesar is maybe a bit of an issue for Ritual Beast, so that actually might also be a problem. Yeah, I guess there's a reason this deck's win rate fell off. Like, there's even against the decks that aren't known for being impressive going first, this deck still struggles with. So that's, I kind of want to put it down here, because the only reason that I kept this so high before was because I didn't like the theory behind Ritual Beast, but the official stats kept proving me wrong. So I'm like, what else? What am I supposed to argue with the stats here? But now they're not. So like, it's down to this group, I suppose. Yeah. I actually want to put Mathmech here, because I think Blood is actually probably better than Mathmech at this point. So yeah, did I forget anything that I wanted to include? Yeah, I guess actually there is one that I probably should have included in the last tier list instead of this one, because that was more relevant. Because Dynamorphia was actually, back when Tenpai was still popular, Dynamorphia was actually more relevant. But now, as I mentioned before, not a good format for backdoor decks specifically, especially now going second is so much harder. So that's, this I would have put this a lot higher. I should have put this a lot higher for the tier list I made for the last Duelist Cup, but now it's like I can't really justify this being that high, to be honest. Also, something I realize is now that if people are playing Bystials now, people are playing Druid's Worm, and when you make a Rex term and then it gets Druid's Worm, that's another out that people play the Rex term now that wasn't as common before. So so I always have trouble playing Dynamorphic, because it's a deck that not I don't think it's very common. I don't think many people play it. And also, I'm not talking. I'm talking like straight up Dynamorph. I'm not talking about Ryu-Ge Dynamorphia. No, that's it's another Ryu-Ge variant that's better off without the Ryu-Ge cards. So I think Dynamorphia is better actually than Argostar, right? Surely, right? Like surely. Yeah, I don't know if I want to put it above the combo decks or below the combo decks, because technically, like, which one's better at going first, right? Not all of these are kind of miserable going second, but like, what's generally what's probably going to be the higher winner going first? I'll put this here. If there's anything, there's one thing that doesn't make exactions about this tier list is because I put Lab so much higher. When if my logic is that back row is going to be bad and I put all the back row decks down here, Lab isn't like so much better than something like Dynamorphic that is like, I don't know, a full tier plus higher. So that this might be a bit weird. This is a little. I like most of these plays, and I think maybe these are all in the right tiers, but I could definitely be argued that like the placement within the tiers could be rearranged a little bit. But I mean, of course, feel free to tell me how wrong I am in the comments. That's what the comments are for. I really appreciate anyone who has watched this far into this video, because I don't do this all in one take. I have a bunch of separate recordings that I have to put into one video, and so I don't even know how long exactly this video is, but this feels like the longest damn video I've ever done in my life. So if you've gotten this far, you reserve the right to roast me as hard as you can, and I would fucking deserve it. But yeah, if I notice any quick changes I would make at the end or after I upload this, or if you guys make any good arguments, or like if I hear any good arguments, and I'm willing to like make a small post a small pin post discussing any possible changes I would make to this list even after it's uploaded. So like don't feel like this is exactly final or anything. If you feel like there's anything egregiously wrong, I can continue uploading this list in the comments too. So yeah, keep look in the comments to see if I did or not. But yeah.